Hey, welcome to a little video walkthrough exploration of ComfyTD, which is an operator that allows for any ComfyUI network to be used inside of TouchDesigner. This won't be a typical step-by-step tutorial or a network building guide. My goal today is just to explain my approach with the operator as well as a little bit about ComfyUI in general. This video is going to be more geared towards people already relatively familiar with TouchDesigner, and I'm going to cover a range of different things to keep in mind when using the operator in your projects. As we go through, I encourage you to explore and experiment along with the video, but this will be less about duplicating each click I make and more about understanding how the operator works in general. I'm going to try and cover a lot, but by the end of the video, you should have everything you need to know in order to use this operator in your own creative process and future TouchDesigner projects. All right, let's get started. To load the operator into a TouchDesigner network, you're going to want to just drag it anywhere from where you've downloaded it on disk. Drag it into your project, drop it in. You can also, if it's in your palette, once you have it set up in this Comfy page, you probably want to save it to your palette so that it's already set up with all of the settings and stuff that you need. See, this is already set with my base folder, and yeah, and I'm good to go with this. But for now, we're going to start with this, which is a fresh one. First thing you're going to want to set is this ComfyUI base folder, the base folder parameter. This should be a full folder path. I'm going to do the Alt hover. Should be a full folder path to the ComfyUI folder. This base folder right now only works with the Windows portable version, but this operator will connect with any install of ComfyUI or any ComfyUI server, as long as you have the API URL in here. But to use this operator in launch, you need the portable version, and you need to put the full Windows path to ComfyUI here. So I'm going to do that. Once you set this, this lets the operator know where your install of ComfyUI is, and that allows it to launch from the operator. When you launch it, it will launch in the background now, and that way TouchDesigner will stay in the front, but you will see as soon as you hit launch, there is now this command window that is opening, and it's starting the launch process. So when you first load the operator, you'll see in this node info, it says none must connect to ComfyUI. It's actually going to sync all of the node information and all of the Comfy nodes from your server as soon as it connects and load that information into the operator. And that allows each of these workflows to get the right options and parameters here. And then once ComfyUI launches, which mine takes a while because I have a lot of extensions, yours might not take as long or might take longer. Once it launches, the operator will sync with the server and give you this count for how many nodes you have installed in Comfy via extensions and the base install. Once this is set up and stuff, you are good to start using the operator now that you're connected to Comfy. My basic approach to this is I wanted a way to take any sort of ComfyUI workflow and bake it down into a operator in TouchDesigner. When you first load ComfyUI, it'll probably be the default workflow. So ComfyUI exists here in the browser most of the time. Most of the time that you work with it, you're going to be working with the browser. The way that it works is this workflow is a chain of operations. Some things like this is actually loading the model, and then you have these things that takes the clip information out of the model, which is the text tokenizer, and brings it in, and you actually then define what text is tokenized and sent as conditioning to your K-sampler, which is where the actual diffusion magic happens. There's this negative prompt, which is added as a conditioning, but it's added as the negative conditioning into the K-sampler. Then also in the load checkpoint, you have the model and the VE, The model is what actually is doing the denoising in the K-sampler. So you can see that it's plugged in with this purple line to the K-sampler here in the model. And the VE is what is encoding and decoding. So kind of translating from the latent space into pixel space. So this VE that's coming from the model here is being dragged out and put into this VE decode. So pretty much you're loading the model, defining what sort of prompts and conditioning the model space is going to be defined in. All of that gets sent to the K-sampler. And then the K-sampler receives also this empty latent image, which is defined by pixel space. And then it sends this latent, which is, I guess, the latent space of this pixel space. You don't need to worry about it too much, but basically 512 by 512 pixels goes into the K-sampler and then uses the model and the conditioning to denoise the noise that's set by these values over this many steps with this much conditioning guidance with the sampler and the scheduler. Yeah, whatever. And once this does its thing, if I actually click this to run the model, most of the processing happens here. That's the denoising. And then it takes it out of the latent space, decodes it into pixel space. That's like way too much information. I don't know how much I'm going to include in that, but then you get your image. So all of this works in the browser, and that's great. But it is going to be even greater if we can load some of these or all of these settings into TouchDesigner and then just get this image. So within ComfyUI, there's like a couple options. When you first install, some of these options won't be there. One of the things that you're going to want to install is the ComfyUI Manager. This is basically the only extension that you're going to have to install manually to ComfyUI. When you first load ComfyUI, the custom nodes folder will be empty like this, and then you're going to want to install the manager by copying this and going to your folder in this bar, typing cmd, which will open a command window, and then in here you can do git clone and then paste, hit enter, and that will clone the manager into this custom nodes folder. And then the next time that you launch ComfyUI, you are going to have this little manager icon here. What the manager allows you to do is install nodes. If someone sends you a workflow or something, which you can drag and drop workflows into the browser, then in this manager tab, you can hit this install missing custom nodes, and it'll give you a list of all of the custom node packs that you need to install in order to get this workflow working. And you can hit install, 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 install down here in this column under install. And then basically you'll need to take the ComfyUI. This is just the place we downloaded the repo. I'm going to close out of that. Once it installs all the stuff, you're going to want to close the ComfyUI server. And then it's probably going to say like, oh, we're not able to connect, which is fine. And then in TouchDesigner here, launch again. So now that we're back in ComfyUI, we have our workflow, and this is like the most basic workflow, just simple text to image. Let's go New York City skyline, claymation world, stunning details, tilt, shift, mini, and then maybe pick a different model. Let's go SDXL. And then SDXL has a different base resolution, so you want to set it to 1024 by 1024. And now you can see clicking through the actual GUI of this is, yeah, it's not amazing, the whole UI, but it's really good for what it is and like node based in the browser. So now it's loading the model. We've set a new latent size, so this is now going to be a 1024 by 1024 pixel wide image with a different prompt. And now we have a New York City skyline, claymation, whatever, tilt shift, mini. Great. Now we have a workflow that we like. And Jesus, it's not capitalized. So in order to load this into TouchDesigner, you have to do a couple things, or one thing. But first, you're probably not going to see this larger button that says Save API Format. So you're going to want to hit this gear icon, and within the settings, there is a setting that says Enable Dev Mode Options, and you're going to want to make sure that's clicked. You can see the Save API Format coming on and off there. That is enabled. Go down, scroll down, and hit Close, and then you're going to want to hit Save API Format. You can name it here, or you can also name it. It's going to then download it, and you can name it in the file browser as well, but I'm going to just call this Simple Text to Image Walkthrough API, and then within this, you can see it's actually already downloaded to the folder that I have all my workflows in. I have a lot here, but the way I have it set up as the default in the operator is that there's now an API folder within your base folder for ComfyUI. So from the ComfyUI browser, you're going to want to download this API workflow to this API folder, and then hit save here. That'll bring it in. And then when you go back to TouchDesigner, now you are ready to load that into the operator. You'll notice under API parameters, this is where you hit generate and actually send the workflow back to the ComfyUI server. But there's nothing set up right now. There's a ton of toggles in this, but that's like way too many. So we're going to first need to find that API JSON that we just downloaded. I think I called it, simple text to image, or simple text image walkthrough API. Once you click that, as long as update config is on, these parameters in the API config should change. These are toggles that allow you to basically expose these settings within the API parameters. So you're going to want to hit maybe toggle all config, which will just toggle on and off based on like how many are on, but it's handy. First, you want to hit toggle all config and then hit update API parameters. You see the operator changes a little bit. That change is reflected in the API parameters page. And now you'll see that we have all of the same things that we have in the browser here with these same settings that we set when we saved it as the default parameters within the API parameters. Everything under the current active API workflow parameters, when you hit generate, will dictate what is sent to the server. One thing to keep in mind is that this instance right here of ComfyUI, or maybe this instance, or anything you have in the browser, doesn't relate at all to the TouchDesigner session. This is separate, and this sends the workflow in a similar process that the browser does, but just on the back end. It's all running in TouchDesigner. So you'll see we have the same settings, and if we run this, we'll hit get a queue and we'll get some progress going, and then we'll see our image here, and it's a different seed, so it's a slightly different image, but it's the same settings. One thing in ComfyUI that they do is some of these settings have this control after generate, randomize, increment, decrement, fixed mode. I have a similar thing in TouchDesigner, and that allows for every time you hit Q prompt or generate in TouchDesigner, it will change the seed. And this is helpful because ComfyUI will cache all of these things. And if you do the exact same settings, so I'm going to just turn this on fixed so the seed doesn't change, run it here. I'm doing it in the browsers just so it's like easier to see kind of what is happening on the back end. And now this is run, and if I hit Q prompt again, this is with the same seed, it will, I think in here, it says prompt execute in 0 seconds. Basically, it didn't run again because all of the settings were the same. So that's something to keep in mind in TouchDesigner. If I have this set pars after generate, and it has similar options here. I have it right now to randomize, and this will show you the currently included parameters. So if you don't have the parameters named like this, it's not going to affect it, but it will take anything called seed or noise seed and randomize it. So now when I hit generate, you can see the seed changed, but if I was to keep consistent and hit generate and then generate, it adds a second to the queue. We'll see in here that that second one took 0 seconds. So just so you know, you're going to want to have these settings changing constantly in order to kind of refresh the operator and get like not finished in 0 seconds. One thing that you can actually do is change the file name prefix, which is just basically like by going like, I'm going to just call this walkthrough tests slash, we'll just go text to image. And then now if I hit pulse, that has changed, but I think it's, so yeah, it executed in 0.2 seconds. So that actually is just the saving of the actual PNG. So in the display settings, you can change, like if you hit this update range, it'll change the slider so you can scroll through them. This is showing the last generation because display last is turned on. So if you turn that off, you can now go through and see all of the New York City skylines that we've generated within TouchDesigner. These last couple are all the same image, so when I change this, it's not changing. But you can actually then, I'm on display last, you can view the file in folder, and this will open that walkthrough tests with text image 0001. Then you can access the image here if you want to access it here. I would recommend throwing things in their own folders, because especially Windows, because it doesn't like to browse like a bunch of files in the output or in a folder. I have like 17,000 in this ComfyUI thing, and it's going to take a hot minute for Windows to like load this whole folder. So it's just kind of faster to work with the files if they're separated in folders. The way that the operator works is it's actually just storing a list of the file paths inside. So all the generations is stored in one table, which you can kind of access and save if you want to get fancy with it. Here, but there's this job table that stores all of the file paths. So even if you are putting things in just the output folder, like these first couple, the operator's still going to have no problem, and it's not going to be slow like the file explorer, because it's just pulling the file path, which is great. So this shows you, we took the simple text image walkthrough, we loaded this in. If you were to change this, this has now changed the current API JSON workflow. You'll notice that the API parameters haven't changed. That's because we haven't hit this update API parameters and changed what they are. And if you change workflows, if these toggles, if they have the same parameter names, it will roughly try to keep the same parameters exposed. So if I actually hit update API parameters, it will remove the stuff that I don't need from the simple text to image, but it will keep the settings and parameters here. So that allows you to kind of change some workflows roughly, as long as they're relatively the same, and keep some parameters and some settings in case you have expressions or something here. But do keep in mind that changing this will change what workflow is sent to the server once you hit generate. But these parameters will not change until you hit update API parameters. So if I was to go back to, I think this is just another default one, update API parameters, we're going to go back to having all the stuff that we had before. But you'll notice that none of the actual defaults change. If I was to hit clear API parameters, which it'll give this little pop-up, which is just letting you know what's going to happen. So we'll take all those parameters away. We can hit update again, and it will now have the base values of this current workflow. Let's reset it back to what I made today, simple text image workflow. We have the old parameters, which this would work with this. Yeah, but just to get back to where we were, I'm going to hit clear API parameters. You can actually hit cancel here in the about thing, the warning pop-ups. Turn those off if you want, and then clear API parameters will just clear it. I'm going to keep this on. There's not really too many other than clear and clear all config toggles, which will remove these toggles. which you can get those back by turning update config on and off, and then toggle these on, and then hit update API parameters. Now we're back to the simple text image workflow with the New York City skyline. We can change the seed and hit generate, and we're going to get another thing as long as display last is on, and woohoo. Great, so that's kind of like general overview of most of the basic settings and how you would work with it super simply. I'm going to do like an image to image. I think I have, yeah, simple image to image. Ooh, this one's got LoRa. Cool. Let's hit toggle all config and make sure all these toggles are on. Hit update API parameters. It's going to change, actually keep the same text, which is fun. But now you'll notice a few more things. We have this image parameter, which is a up parameter. So the way to get input images into ComfyTD is just through tops. So I'm going to spell it wrong, but drop down a noise. And then it is dependent on the resolution that you set this. So let's set this by 512 by 512. And actually we're doing SDXL. So let's go back to the noise and set it to 1024 by 1024. And then this is going to be our input image. Let's just change some of the settings, make it a little stronger and colorful. Yeah. Maybe whatever. Doesn't matter too much. I'm going to drag a null out. And then the point of this is to always kind of separate things so you can plug anything into this null. I'm going to call this null input. And then select the Comfy op and drag null input into the image thing. You'll see this little line, and now the null input top will be used as the input image. Now this denoising slider is important since it's image to image, so let's set this to like somewhere close to the middle. And now run this, and it's going to, on the back end, save a temporary image for this image to image and use that as the input image here. And you'll see that not much has changed because I guess that wasn't enough denoising to get that far from the image. Let's run it again. This is actually with the same seed because I'm on keep consistent, but higher denoise. Let's go even more. And then that is how you can kind of do like an image to image thing. A slightly more, like you could use this to, this is also with the LoRa, so we can actually turn the strength down to 0 for the model, which is the LoRa model. And then if we generate, then it shouldn't take any of this LoRa to affect the prompt, and we should just get more standard New York City skyline claymation, but with the colors and input image. Even though it's fully denoised, it's still defining a lot of the initial noise with this input image, and you'll see the effect. With these outputs, you can expose them and you'll get some information and more stuff that you can use in your network. You have some handy chops in the second one. In the third one, you have like generation settings. This will show you all of the generation settings in the workflow, no matter what are shown here. And then in the last one is the logs. So this will basically show you what's going on in the backend. You don't need to look at that too much, but it's helpful for debugging and monitoring purposes. So this null is the output. What if we wanted to kind of make like a deform style animation setup where we take the output and plug it back into the model, change the settings, take the output, plug it back into the model, maybe do some transformations in your TouchDesigner network? That is pretty doable, just creating kind of like a little loop. Let's go null end, and then spell it right. I'm going to take a select top and drop it down at the front of the network here and drag the null end on top of it. So now we're selecting the end, and instead of the noise going into the null input, we're just going to take this. So now when we do this, we're fully denoised, but let's change this and it's keep consistent. Let's do randomized value. And since the last time that we ran it, it was on keep consistent, it's going to be the same seed as last generation. So let's change it. Run the generation again. And we'll get a new version of this prompt, but now it's looping. And for this type of setup, you probably want to do less denoise. So now this will be much more like this input image. And we'll probably still get the Statue of Liberty, hopefully. Yeah. And then that type of thing is kind of like a deform setup. There's a lot of things that the models tend to do. They often tend to go into oversaturated color space, and they tend towards some of these blurry options, or are attracted to pink and purple things a lot. All of these things can kind of be controlled within TouchDesigner by either color correction or mixing in other input images in order to keep it closer to some sort of input video or input image thing. But yeah, all of that just to keep in mind. You'll see some kind of wonky colors if you keep it to just this loop over and over and over. Within the ComfyTD operator, you can hit generate and then turn on this keep generating toggle, and that will, at the end of the run, it will start the generation again. And this allows you to kind of let the loop keep running. You can change these settings on the fly if you want. It's not too fast, but it is a nice enough speed that if your network is super complex and you're doing something really intentional, you can kind of like animate in super slow motion with maybe like a MIDI controller or something. And then there are certain models that you can run like SDXL Turbo that are going to give you a significantly faster speed for generation, and a bunch of things that you can tweak. But now that this is running, let's maybe add like two tops here, a lens distort, and a transform. And then since these aren't doing anything, I'm going to plug them in, and we're still generating here, but I'm going to just like display this null here so that we can see what's going on in the lens distort. Or actually, let's display this input so that we can see what's going on in the input. Now in the lens distort, let's go layout, mirror, and we can kind of like bend this back and maybe make it go a little globy. So this will start to affect the image, and you'll see that's maybe a little extreme, but this is like a fun effect to get some sort of like globy ball type thing. I don't know, maybe we can reinforce it by also zooming in a little bit. So we'll get like this, like maybe a little bit more zoom in and scaling ball effect. One thing I notice is we're zooming in now, but we're going to be a little to the right of the Statue of Liberty. So let's transform this over a little bit. And now this maybe will force our camera to kind of zoom into her face, ideally. Oh, that's a little too much. And this is like the super rough version, but we're now controlling our camera slightly, ever so slightly, and we're zooming into her face. We're like super blurry, so maybe one thing you can add is a level. Give it a little more contrast. That's not going to help too much, but it'll help with something. Maybe you can change the prompt to be like sharp focus. Maybe that'll help. This transform is now scaling up a little too much. Let's slow down that scale. Even out the lens distort. The colors and the blur are getting like hella crazy, but yeah. Are we still transforming? Let's zero this out because we're now drifting farther from her face. Let's just center it. And I don't want to ping pong, but that's still pretty central on her face. Let's actually add a HSV adjust. I'm going to delete this noise to clean our network. And within this HSV adjust, I'm going to turn the saturation down because we're getting too saturated. And in general, like, this is pretty awful, but this kind of shows you, bypass that by hitting B because it's too strong. This shows you a little bit of what a deform-like setup can be run in TouchDesigner. Some things turn off generation. Some things to maybe improve the quality is to, I don't know where I put things. Take this sharpening operator that I made, which is like super simple, but it's just gives a little bit of sharpening to the image, provides a little bit more juice. You can also denoise it a little bit more. Still transforming. Jeez. Slow that down to nothing. Keep generating on, so that keeps going. And just trying to negative prompt us out of this turn off display. And then, yeah, so this is going nowhere, but this gives you a rough idea of kind of the image-to-image deform style setup. You can go back and hit update range to get our range updated, and we can see the zoom in, and you can kind of see that the color drift starts to happen. Then I start like messing with it, but that gives you a good idea of like kind of what you can start to build with this operator. A couple other things to cover is the ComfyTD thing has callbacks. So this allows you to add custom scripts to add functionality to the operator. Within the callbacks here, they're all turned on, and it'll actually give a little bit of info in the text port for you. You can turn this off in case you don't want that, which is understandable. Just hit none there, and then when you generate, you're not going to see anything in your text port if you're debugging other things. But within the callbacks, you can add your own Python stuff to, perhaps after you generate, you want to trigger a system that changes the generation settings depending on other parts of a larger system. The ones are on generate, on done, on connect, and on disconnect. And those last two are with the actual server, so there's no way to close the server from TouchDesigner at this point. But if you open the text port with Alt-T and go into the callback settings and go back to basic info, if I close the server here, we'll get this disconnect callback. Once it realizes that we no longer are connected to ComfyUI, and that is also seen in the status. And if we launch here, which again, it's going to launch in the background, you can see it running here. Once it launches, we'll get this on connect. So in case, once you launch something, if you want something to happen, like maybe the generation starts, you can write ComfyTD op generate here. Generate. And then with this .generate function, which you can see all the functions if you hit middle mouse over the operator, and you can see like some of the things that you can use with Python in the external class. This generate function will just basically hit this pulse. You can also, if you really wanted to, go .par.generate.pulse. But both of those will do the same thing. And I'm going to actually just get rid of that. Doing a little undo action. And yeah, that is how you're working with the ComfyUI operator. You want to be in the GUI, mess with your setup, experiment, make sure it works, make sure it's giving you somewhat what you want, and the settings are maybe close to what your TouchDesigner setup is going to need, maybe not even close, but just like now that you have something that's working, baking it down into the workflow and bringing it into TouchDesigner, downloading that API workflow with the Save API button, bringing it into the API folder, selecting it here. There's like this RIFE 2 frames thing that I have. Then making sure that the parameters that you want selected are toggled on and hitting update API parameters. And then going to the API parameters, and you can see all the stuff that you have saved or selected and made available. This Setup is kind of cool. The RIFE 2 frames, it's basically taking the RIFE interpolation model, which I think I have 46 downloaded. It's good to like kind of use the stuff you've already downloaded, and it'll interpolate 2 images. So it's like a interesting example maybe, but let's go from this ugly thing to this noise. And then, so we already have the null input, which, yeah, that works too, as the first image. And then we're going to take the noise as input 1. I just changed this and didn't drag a null out, but whatever. And then file name prefix, let's just go RIFE test. I don't know. We don't really need to make a folder for it, but it's a good idea. And then these are all the settings that I just set when I saved this workflow. So again, we're going between these 2 images and hit generate. Oh, error. Nice. Scale 0.5, not in the list, 0.5, 0.5. Did I just find an issue? It made this a drop-down menu, but if it's a number, it's being sent. Interesting. I'm just gonna open the component editor and go down to the scale factor thing. And instead of the menu, I'm gonna change it to an integer. So sometimes, in case something doesn't work, you can change the scale factor to, oh, it's not an int, it's a float. Huh. 0.5, generate. Now we'll see we're running and it's done. And now, oh, wow, we got some interesting little interpolation between these images. And you'll see that was pretty darn quick. Again, if you hit generate, oh, it actually is going to run. Oh, well, yeah, it's because the input image was different or is the same. Now these noises are very similar. We can kind of lock this if we wanted to just keep those the same. And then I turn back display last, and then we'll go frame rate. I think the multiplier is like how many frames are in between. So if we want it to be a faster one, go 5. And we get like 5 frames, and then let's go 30. Be a slower interpolation. Sick. Now we get, and like, yeah, so you can see how the ComfyUI workflow can be used to do several different things. You also got to see me dealing with a bug that will fix, hopefully. Some workflows get really crazy. Here's a workflow designed by Suspense, which is like a animatediff that uses black and white input video as some control nets called geometric shapes. I'm sure he's happy to share it. But I'm going to toggle all these on, and we're going to see how crazy the operator can get. Hit update API parameters. There's a little bit of a delay, but it's loading a lot. And off the top of my head, honestly, I don't know what these do, but I do believe that it should work. What is this input video? A logo? What's this value? There should be something, as far as I know with these things, there should be something that probably sets the amount of frames, and it might be this value. Can get really tricky to kind of blindly search through some of these things. Some helpful things to do are this alt hover help, which will show you all of the information that's saved within the API workflow for this parameter. Let's just, oh yeah, we're using this as an input image. I think that's going to use that as like a style guide, which would be awful. Is this going to work? Oh, all right, it's working. Sick. Cool. So I just loaded this giant workflow. I have no idea what's going to happen, and it's probably going to take a while. But let's maybe show some other parts about the operator. Also in this Comfy thing, there's this ComfyUI Panel Options. If you click this, this will open a little thing. Here, pop-up base, and this gives you the opportunity to use a web browser all within TouchDesigner. So let's split left-right and turn this into a panel. And then the panel that we're actually going to look at is this viewer op reference. Just drag this into here, turn on the active button, and then we're going to get ComfyUI within TouchDesigner. See, we're still kind of rocking and rolling on this animatediff, which is going to take one more minute. An API parameters page. I'm going to close this. You can see we're going. Don't know what that error is, but maybe something when we were loading this, the connection went on and off and it was trying to find the job that it's working on. So yeah, no worries. Within this, you can do all of the same things that you're doing within the ComfyUI browser here. You can see my manager. I have this update NDI list button, which is due to the fact that I am using a NDI in out extension, which allows me to, where is it? NDI load image. I can actually, and NDI send image. So now we're going to get our guy. Oh, keep generating is on. No. What happened? Still seeing this. Oh yeah, because this workflow is crazy, and it's going probably to some sort of upscaling phase. So it's not done. We haven't actually gotten our output, but our progress was done because case samplers show the progress. Oh no, we got it. I remember. I think that this video was just a my handle.simulate as a logo, and then we got this animation in 170 seconds. But what is the resolution of this? 512 by 512. Okay, that's probably set somewhere here, or set by the input image. I don't know. I haven't looked at this workflow in over a month. So if I wanted to kind of have this here, pop it out, hit this button, now we got full UI. These are just the NDI thing. And if I was to go NDI out from TouchDesigner. TouchDesigner is my source name, and NDI pop out here. Update NDI list. I hit that twice. Probably didn't need to hit it twice. Maybe I need to delete the node and find it again. NDI load image. Maybe I need to refresh. Yeah, refresh was the ticket. So now, instead of an empty latent image, let's take this and go, ComfyUI, double click, search, VE encode, take the pixels here and the VE, because like I said, the VE deals with encoding and decoding, drag it here, and then the latent goes to the case sampler. And we're going to also do a preview image so we can see to prove to ourselves that NDI works. And then within TouchDesigner, sorry, delete. We'll get our preview image. Oh, I didn't need to delete that. And we're actually going image to image. Oh, it's fully denoised. Let's go half denoised. And now we're going to get our input image half denoised in the little bottle prompt. Let me tweak the settings a little bit more. Cue it one more time. Great. This is wonderful. Now we got ComfyUI in TouchDesigner also like this. Close this, and then here we can click that somehow and hit enable dev mode options. And if we wanted to save this, we could actually hit save API format, and then, oh no, it didn't pop up, but, oh, did I click it? I swear this was working. Okay, maybe I'll figure that out too. Whatever. All right. And yeah, that's a long-winded little walkthrough of the ComfyUI operator. Is there anything else I need to like freaking cover? I don't know what all these settings do, but they're all good settings. And yeah,